Hi, I'm Ezra. And today, I want to tell you about the night I discovered my stepson was planning to kill me. I was carrying a bag of groceries when I heard Marcus in the garage say, "Yeah, I cut his brakes. He'll be gone by Monday." My hands went numb. The bag slipped, and a can of soup hit the concrete floor with a metallic crack that echoed too loud. I froze in the doorway between the kitchen and garage, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The overhead light was off, just the blue glow of Marcus's phone screen illuminating his face from below, making him look like something carved from stone, cold, empty. He was 28 years old, my wife's son, and in that moment, he looked capable of anything. "Relax," Marcus said into the phone, voice smooth as oil. "It's already done. Clean cut on the rear line. He drives Highway 20 every morning to the job site. 70 miles an hour, downhill stretch near the river. He won't make it through the first turn." I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The garage smelled like motor oil and cold concrete, that familiar scent that usually meant Saturday mornings and tune-ups. Now it smelled like a grave. Then I heard her voice through the phone speaker, Melissa, my wife. Faint but unmistakable. "You're absolutely sure this will work? Not stop. Not what have you done. Not, oh my God. Just making sure the plan was solid." My chest felt like it was caving in. Marcus shifted his weight and I heard the soft clink of a tool being set down on the workbench. "I'm sure, Mum, you said you wanted out. This is the cleanest way. Accident, insurance payout, no questions." There was a pause that felt like falling. Then Melissa's voice again, quieter now, almost tender. "I know, baby. Thank you. Just be careful." The phone call ended. Marcus pocketed his phone and stood there in the dark for a moment, rolling his shoulders like he'd just finished a workout. I moved backward, one silent step at a time, my boots barely touching the floor. My pulse roared in my ears. When I made it back into the kitchen, I set the groceries down with shaking hands and stared at the wall. 53 years old. 2 decades working construction, building homes for other families, while mine was plotting my funeral. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march back in there and confront him, wrap my hands around his throat and demand answers. But something stopped me. Something cold and calculating that I didn't know. I had, inside me, patience, strategy, survival. I'd been a foreman long enough to know that rushing into a bad situation without a plan gets you killed. So instead, I grabbed my keys, slipped out the front door, and walked to my truck like I was just going out for a drive. It was November in Iowa, the kind of night where your breath fogs and the cold bites through your jacket. The street was quiet, porch lights glowing. A dog barked once in the distance, normal life, while mine was ending. I sat in the driver's seat of my Silverado, the one Marcus had just sabotaged, and stared at my hands on the steering wheel. They were shaking. I didn't start the engine. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called the only person I could think of. Ray Kowalski, Marcus's biological father. Ray and Melissa had split when Marcus was 6, a messy divorce that left scars on everyone involved, but Ray was solid. A mechanic who'd taught Marcus everything about cars before the kid decided he hated his father more than he loved the work. If anyone could help me prove what Marcus had done, it was Ray. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. "Ezra." His voice was rough with sleep. "It's 11 o'clock. What's wrong?" "I need your help," I said, and my voice cracked. "Tonight. Right now." There was a pause. Then Ray's tone shifted, sharper, more alert. "Where are you?" "Sitting in my truck." "In my driveway." I swallowed hard. "Ray, I think Marcus cut my brake line." Silence. Then, "Don't move. Don't start that truck. I'm coming to you." 20 minutes later, Ray pulled up in his old Ford Hazards, blinking. He climbed out, a stocky man in his 50s, with grease permanently stained into the creases of his hands. He walked straight to my driver's side window and looked at me hard. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "I heard him say it," I replied. On the phone, to Melissa. "He said he cut the rear brake line. Said I'd be gone by Monday." Ray's jaw tightened. He nodded once, then walked around to the rear of my truck and dropped to his knees. He pulled a flashlight from his pocket and shone it up under the chassis. I sat there, watching in the rearview mirror, my heart in my throat. After a long moment, Ray stood up. His face was pale. "It's cut," he said flatly. "Clean slice. Recent. This wasn't an accident, Ezra. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." My vision blurred. I'd hoped, stupidly, that maybe I'd misheard, that maybe Marcus was joking, or talking about someone else's truck, or that I was losing my mind. But no, it was real. Ray leaned against the truck bed, exhaling hard. "We need to call the police." "Right now, and say, what?" I asked bitterly. "My stepson said something I overheard, and, oh, by the way, my wife might be in on it." "Ray, they'll think I'm paranoid. A jealous husband. They'll think I did this myself for attention." Ray rubbed his face. "Then we document everything. We get this truck towed somewhere safe, somewhere they can't touch it. We get a mechanic to inspect it officially, take photos, write a report. We build a case." "Where?" I asked. Ray met my eyes. "My place. I'll store it in my garage. I'll do the inspection myself, and I'll call a buddy who's a certified mechanic to verify. We'll have everything documented before the sun comes up." I nodded slowly. It was the only plan that made sense. Ray pulled out his phone and called a tow company, explaining we needed an emergency tow for a vehicle with brake failure. While we waited, I sat in silence, staring at my house. The lights were on in the upstairs bedroom. Melissa was probably getting ready for bed. Maybe texting Marcus to confirm the plan, maybe already thinking about what she'd wear to my funeral. The tow truck arrived 30 minutes later. The driver, a young guy with a clipboard, didn't ask many questions. He hooked up my Silverado and loaded it onto the flatbed. Ray followed in his Ford, and I rode with the tow driver, numb and silent. When we got to Ray's house on the south side of town, he directed the driver to set the truck in his driveway. As soon as the tow truck left, Ray got to work. He pulled the truck into his garage, set up work lights, and put it on jack stands. I stood there watching, useless, while he photographed every angle of the cut brake line. "Look at this," Ray said, his voice tight with anger. He pointed to the clean slice in the metal tubing. "This wasn't done with a hacksaw or some random tool. This was done with a tubing cutter. Precise, deliberate. Whoever did this wanted it to look like it might fail gradually, so you wouldn't notice until it was too late." My stomach turned. Ray called his friend, a guy named Tom who worked at a certified shop across town. Tom arrived within an hour. Groggy but professional, he took one look at the brake line and shook his head. "This is attempted murder," Tom said bluntly. "No question, I'll write up a full report. You need to call the cops." At 2 a.m, sitting in Ray's kitchen with a mug of cold coffee I couldn't drink, I finally called the police. I told them everything. The officer on the phone sounded skeptical at first, but when I mentioned the documented evidence and the mechanic's report, his tone changed. 2 officers arrived at Ray's house by 3. They took statements, photographed the truck, and reviewed Tom's written report. One of them, an older officer with gray at his temples, looked at me with something like pity. "Mr. Ezra," he said quietly, "you're lucky you didn't drive that truck. If you'd hit your brakes at highway speed with that line cut, you'd have had maybe 10% braking power. On a downhill stretch, you wouldn't have stood a chance." I nodded, unable to speak. They left with promises to follow up, to investigate, to bring Marcus in for questioning. As the sun started to rise over Ray's garage, I sat on an old workbench and finally let myself break. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at my hands, realizing how close I'd come to dying. Ray handed me a beer even though it was 6 a.m. "Drink it," he said. "You earned it." By noon, the police had gone to my house. I wasn't there. Ray had insisted I stay with him, and I was grateful. I didn't want to see Melissa's face. Didn't want to hear her excuses or her lies. The detective called me that afternoon. "We've arrested Marcus Kowalski on suspicion of attempted murder and tampering with a motor vehicle," he said. "We've also brought your wife in for questioning, and..." I asked, my voice hollow. She's not talking. But we found text messages between her and Marcus discussing your life insurance policy. We found a receipt for a tubing cutter purchased 3 days ago at a hardware store near your home. The cashier remembers Marcus. We've got 'em, Mr. Ezra. We've got them both. I hung up and sat in Ray's living room, staring at nothing. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief. The trial took 8 months. Melissa hired a lawyer who tried to claim she'd been manipulated by Marcus, that she was a victim to. But the text messages told a different story. Messages where she'd asked him if he was sure he could pull it off. Messages where she'd researched how long it takes for insurance payouts after accidental death. Messages where she'd talked about starting fresh, just the two of them, without me in the picture. Marcus got 15 years. Melissa got 10. I sat in the courtroom and watched them both get led away in handcuffs, and I felt nothing. Just empty. I sold the house. Couldn't stand to be there anymore. Couldn't walk past that garage without seeing Marcus's shadow. I bought a small place outside of town, a cabin near the woods where the only sound at night is wind through the trees. Ray checks on me sometimes. Brings me dinner, sits on the porch, doesn't say much. We don't need to. Some nights, I still wake up in a cold sweat, dreaming that I got into that truck. That I didn't hear Marcus in the garage. That I drove to work that Monday morning and never came home. But I did hear him. And I didn't panic. I didn't confront him. I moved smart, documented everything, and let the truth do the rest. If you're listening to this and something feels wrong in your own life, trust that feeling. Don't ignore it. Don't rationalize it away. Your gut knows when something's broken beyond repair. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone you love wants you gone, remember this: patience isn't weakness. Strategy isn't cowardice. Survival is the only victory that matters. I'm Ezra. I'm 53 years old. And I'm still here.